All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It is just a real pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for coming to 31 states and counting, the trend to abolish juvenile life without parole. So my name is Preston Shipp. You can pick up on it. I'm not from Michigan. I'm actually from Nashville, Tennessee. I serve as senior policy counsel for a national organization called the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. We are very grateful for our partners with Safe and Just Michigan and the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice for hosting this event with us and making this all possible. So we've got a wonderful panel for you today, including Eric Alexander to my far left. Eric's a colleague of mine. He serves as senior advocate with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. He's also a founding member of ICANN, which is the Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network. And then Jose Burgos, to my immediate left, is a Michigan native. He's the reentry specialist for the State Appellate Defender's Office here. He's also a member of the ICANN network. Then we're going to hear from John Cooper, the executive director of Safe and Just Michigan. And then virtually, thanks to technology, we are delighted to have a couple of people from Ohio join us. First is John Rush. John is the founder and CEO of Clean Turn, which is one of Central Ohio's leading commercial cleaning companies, as well as 180 Demolition and Third Way Cafe. So we're going to get to hear from Ohio business leader about his knowledge of and involvement in this issue, and then Rayshawn Holt, who is the program director at Beacon of Hope Business Alliance. But before we hear from our panelists, I would like to invite Senator Jeff Irwin to come share just briefly. We've started working with Senator Irwin earlier this year because he was interested in this issue, so just want to give him the opportunity to share with you. Senator?
Thank you, Preston, and thank you for the opportunity just to share a few words with everyone who is here. First and foremost, I just want to thank you. This is an exciting opportunity that we all have to make change here in the state of Michigan, and I'm excited to see so many faces of folks who I recognize from here in Michigan who've been part of the fight for justice here in Michigan for a while, and also to see some of my friends from out of state who I've been meeting with via Zoom now here in Lansing to carry this message to the legislators here in Michigan to talk about reforming our juvenile life without parole law, to talk about how that can be important for justice here in Michigan, how it can be important for employment opportunities and economic development. And really, I just wanted to come up here and thank you all. Thank you for telling your stories, because those of us who support reforming our criminal justice laws, and specifically around juvenile life without parole, we know already that the data shows that these individuals, when they come home to the community, they're incredibly productive individuals. They're not reoffending. If you look at the data is incredibly strong that when these people get out, when they get that second chance, when they've been rehabilitated, they prove that rehabilitation has been successful. And we've seen it in states all across the country, and we need to see it here in Michigan. So that's what the data says. But one of the things that all of you advocates may have noticed in the past about this nation that we live in here is that sometimes the data doesn't get you there. Sometimes the data isn't what's necessary to open the hearts and the minds of the people whose hearts and minds need to be opened. And so that's why it's so important, and that's why I want to thank you for coming here to tell your stories. Because it's those stories of redemption, it's those stories of rehabilitations, it's those stories of some of the people who've come out and done amazing things in their community after release. And those are the stories that some of my colleagues need to hear, because there's a lot of reasons to reform our juvenile life without parole bill here in Michigan. It's unjust. It's unconstitutional. It's morally wrong to lock up kids and throw away the key and keep them in prison forever and take them away from their families and their communities. It's wrong. But these legislators need to hear that, and they need to hear it from someone who's looking them in the eye and who's telling them their story and how this change made a difference in their lives. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. I'm really proud to be joining with you all in this this movement for change, and I really appreciate the folks who've been telling their stories, who've been reaching out to their legislators, who've been asking for this change, and especially the folks who've come from so far to help tell the stories of how this has worked in other states, how when other states have changed these laws, it's worked, it's been effective. So thank you for the opportunity, Preston.
Thank you, Senator. Before we get to our first panelist, I just want to note that if you look around and you see somebody wearing one of these "No Child is Born Bad" buttons, that is someone that has firsthand experience with this issue. So feel free afterwards, if you want to hear a little bit more, be a little bit open to storytelling, then find somebody wearing one of these buttons and just ask them who they are and what their story is. So our first panelist, as I mentioned, to my far left, Eric Alexander. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him. And the question that I'd like to get started with, Eric, is just for those of us who aren't paying as close attention as we do at the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, what is JLWOP? And can you tell us about the status of the national trend as it pertains to those sorts of extreme sentences for children?
Yes, thank you, Preston. And thank you all for being here. When we say JLWOP, JLWOP is an acronym for Juvenile Life Without Parole. A lot of American citizens do not know that the United States is the only country in the world that sentences children, meaning those under the age of 18, to a sentence in prison where they are not able to come home, meaning that, there is no redemption, there is no hope. There is no chance of that individual ever returning to society again, no matter how young they are. In some states, as early as 12 years old, an individual can be sentenced to life without parole sentence and never again see society. Now, in terms of the trend, there have been 5 U.S. Supreme Court decisions that have begun to lead us away from this practice. In 2005, in the case of Roper versus Simmons, in 2010, Graham versus Florida, Montgomery versus Louisiana, and lastly, Jones versus Mississippi, the U.S. Supreme Court establishes and upholds that children are constitutionally different from adults in terms of sentencing practice, and that there should be age-appropriate sentencing schemes for children. Starting back in 2005, Roper struck down the death penalty for children. And 2018, Graham invalidated life without parole convictions for non-homicide crimes. In 2012, Miller recognized the need to protect the majority of youth from life without parole sentences, regardless of the crime of conviction. Life without parole as a mandatory minimum sentence for anyone under the age of 18 was found unconstitutional. Montgomery, in 2016, clarified that Miller applied retroactively. Jones reaffirmed both Montgomery and Miller and left it in the hands of the remaining states to continue the trend to move away from life without parole sentences. Now, there has been research on adolescent brain development that has also spoke to the differences in youth than adults in terms of sentencing. On behalf of Roper, Graham, Miller, and Montgomery, there have been health organizations such as the American Academy of Child Adolescent Psychiatry and the American Psychological Association explain thoroughly that there is impetuosity, immaturity, and failure for children to appreciate the risk in the crimes that they take care of, that they take part of. So this has been the ongoing trend, brain science and U.S. Supreme Court decision to lead us away from the trend of sentencing children to life without parole.
Thank you, Eric. So, sometimes doing legislative advocacy work, when we go into a state, it feels like such a heavy lift, to abolish life without the possibility of parole as a sentencing option for kids. But as we begin to talk about it in Michigan, or continue to talk about it in Michigan, I think it's very important to emphasize that this is policy, this is measured common sense reform that has already been passed in 25 other states. And it's not just like all one kind of state. States as diverse as Oregon and Arkansas, Utah and West Virginia, Massachusetts and the Dakotas. So all of these states looked at this issue, listened to the U.S. Supreme Court, learned about the science of adolescent brain development, and said, if somebody is too young to buy a pack of cigarettes or vote or sign a contract or get married because we don't trust their judgment, we know that they're different from adults, then why in this one area of the law do we make believe that they're just as culpable as adults?
Right.
And so you have Texas 2013, 8 years ago, Texas abolished life without parole as a sentencing option for kids. Texas. And we're waiting on Michigan, you know. We were waiting on Virginia and Maryland and Ohio until the past year or so. So these states are falling like dominoes. We need to understand that this is measured, reasonable reform that's been working in West Virginia for 7 years. So thank you for that, Eric. I want to come back to you in a minute and talk about business involvement more specifically. But before we do, I'd like to ask John Cooper, the director of Safe and Just Michigan, to share just a little bit about the status of things here in Michigan and why this legislation is so very important right now. John.
Thanks very much, Preston, and thanks everybody for coming today. It's really good to see many familiar faces, but also many new ones. I see legislators and staffers as well. I want to be very brief about the policy, and then I want to go off script a little bit and invite a colleague up to talk a little bit. But so in Michigan, we had the third most juvenile lifers in the country when Miller was decided. We have the most now because Pennsylvania and Louisiana got their act together and did the right thing. And we have had 2 county prosecutors primarily holding up progress. That's Kim Worthy in Wayne County and Jessica Cooper in Oakland County. Jessica Cooper lost her election, and now things are moving in Oakland County. And I have someone who wouldn't be here if not for that. His name's Ronnie Waters, and I want to invite him up. Ronnie, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah.
You can sit down. Take my seat.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Right.
This was unexpected. I didn't plan to take center stage, but here I am. Yeah, my name is Ronnie Waters, and I'm a community engagement specialist with John's organization, Safe and Just Michigan. I've been out now for just a little over a year, and it's been just amazing, all the things that have happened in my life in that year span. I was a juvenile, 17-year-old when I went to prison. I went to prison for 40 years, over 40 years, and I came home to a brand new world. You know, everything was different. I mean, everything. You know, I see things on television, how technology has took over and the world, but until you step out of a cave and back into a free society, you never know how these things really affect you or how dominant they are in your life. So when I came home, it was like, wow, here I am. So this is what I asked for, but it was completely overwhelming, just completely. It was just by the grace of God that I had such a strong infrastructure, you know, family support, community support, and a lot of people took interest in me and they saw things in me that at one time I didn't see in myself. But over a period of time, when I first went to prison, I was really down because, you know, everybody was, you know, on my back. I had did a heinous crime, you know, no doubt about it. It wasn't my intention for the crime to happen the way it did, but I took a life of Deborah Ann Pacelli. I took that life, and this lady had done nothing to me. You know, it was just completely ridiculous. And I knew that I would be punished for it. Even though it wasn't my intention to commit the crime, I committed the crime. And when I went to prison, I was down on myself. You know, everybody else was beating me down except my family members and stuff. And I was down on myself. But I had to come to grips with that because I was sent to prison not to get old, but to die, you know. And I had so much life in me and I had so much to offer that I refused to die. So I instantly got involved with different programs, anything educational, anything positive. I was involved with it. And slowly over a period of time, I started changing my outlook on myself, you know, ask my victims to forgive me. And I just started to change as a person. And I knew it was something in me that I could give to society, that I could help somebody else with. So I just started in prison, helping people and trying to be positive. I spent all my family's money on appeals. They were, one lawyer would take some money, and the next lawyer stepping up saying, maybe we can go this way. And yes, I didn't stop them. I spent all their money on appeals, and I feel bad about that, but that's the system. It breaks poor people. My family was dirt poor. I mean, until my mother finally got a job with General Motors, and I took every penny that they had basically, and I still feel bad about that, but that's the system. And all my appeals were exhausted, and nothing changed for me. So I was just wondering in prison. I wasn't an angel when I first came down. I'm not going to tell anybody that I was, but I always had my eye on improving, my eye on becoming better, until one day that transferred me to a prison called Rhine Road Prison in Detroit. And it was amazing bunch of prisoners at this prison. And they saw something in me, and they say, hey, man, come be with us. Join this organization. Join this National Lifers Association. Join NAACP. Join something, man, because you're just wandering around here. And I met some guys who just totally got into my head. And they told me, they say, if we're going to go home, these was all lifers, like myself, but they were really politically motivated to go home. They said, if we're going to go home, we got to bring them in. And what they meant by that is that bring all the lawmakers in, all the community leaders in, bring anybody of any significance in the community in to see us and let them know that we are not just rotten, terrible, all the bad things that you could think of, that we had to show them that it was another side to us. And that's what we did. We put on programs. We brought in all type of legislators, all type of politicians. And we began to change minds. And mostly important, it gave me the confidence that I had something to give. It gave me the confidence that this is a way. And I was on my road to becoming a better person. I put away all the nonsense. It's kind of like I just instantly aged out of crime, out of criminal thinking. I didn't want anything negative, man. Get away from me with that. I see an avenue. And fortunate for me, because I said they sent me to prison to die, not to get old, to die. And then it's like 2005, letters started circulating to juveniles that it was a possibility that they would take a second look at you. And when I got that, man, I just grabbed that and hugged it and told everybody that I ever knew or thought of that, hey, get on board with this, And I had a wife who's been with me. This lady's been with me since she was in the 9th grade, still with me today. Let's go right there, Felicia. Take a hand. And, yeah. And every time one, I don't want to dominate your time, but every time one thing would fall, she was like, we're going to get you out of here. Every time one falls through, we just go to the next one. We figure it out, trying to figure it out. Because she didn't feel that I was supposed to be in prison for the rest of my life either. But when the juvenile issue got rolling, she completely engulfed herself in it. She started with an organization with the ACLU, volunteered for that organization, and they did Second Chance for Youth. A lot of you Michigan prisoners know about that, and she worked tirelessly on that program. Not by herself, of course, but she was a member of that. And yeah, when I finally got my shot, wow, so exciting, so much. These bills and the Miller decisions, they breathe so much. This man though breathed so much hope into juveniles. We were walking around like encouraging others. Hey man, you better not mess up, man, because everybody's depending on everybody to get this right. And we were all just so much hope. Because we knew that we had some type of redeeming qualities about ourselves. And you could like, man, I might get a second chance. So exciting, you know. And when I finally got my hearing, I'm from Oakland County, and Jessica Cooper did everything in her powers to keep me locked up for the rest of my life. You know, even though I had a outstanding record, everybody look at my record. You know, it's freedom of information. Go to it. Ronnie Waters say, man, why are you going to keep this guy locked up? I got every vocational trade that Department of Corrections offer, even though I wasn't eligible to be in any of them because I was a lifer, but I never took no for an answer. I'm knocking on the teacher door. I'm catching them coming through on the sidewalk and say, hey, I need to be in your class. And finally, it paid off for me. I got every vocational trade, college credits till they stopped. I would have, if they would have kept going, I'd probably be a doctor by now. But yeah, I did everything. And there was no reason for her to keep trying to put life without parole, but that was irrelevant to her. You know, she was wasting taxpayer money trying to put life without parole on the head of a person who was model prisoner. You know, so when I finally got my shot and came out here, I said, hey, I'm gonna try to make a difference. I instantly started canvassing for the 2020 election, and that went well. I was knocking doors in the middle of a pandemic, you know. I don't like to say I was knocking doors. I was knocking doors down in the middle of a pandemic and discussing criminal justice issues and political candidates also. And I started getting really positive responses, and I'm like, man, hey, they pay me for this? Wow, you know, this is so cool, you know. And then I was got the opportunity to interview with Safe and Just Michigan with my man over here, and he either had pity on me or I impressed him or something, but he gave me a job, man. Yeah. He gave me a job, man, and me and my wife were like, wow, they gonna pay you to do that, man. Like, shh, quiet, you know. And it's been beautiful. I've been going around the state advocating for safe and just agenda, you know, clean slate, expunges, and just criminal justice issues in general. And yeah, life without parole, man, it's ridiculous, you know, because there's so many transformed human beings in there. It's like we get it. I don't know. It's the juveniles. We get it because we know that these people are serious with us, you know. And if we get a second chance, when you even give a person a glimmer of hope that they got a second chance who had a naturalized sentence, man, they gonna walk a straight line and they not gonna talk back. I'm telling you, these are the people who deserve it the most because they are the people in there that are keeping these prisons safe. You can go to a warden in any prison and he'll tell you who the prisoners are that he needs in his prison to make it safe. When a problem arises, he comes to juvenile lifers for them to put the fire out and stuff. So that might be one reason why some people are reluctant to let juvenile lifers go because they're so productive in prison, you know. So I don't want to just talk all day, but
I got a couple things just to I think so you've heard Rye. Should this man be in prison? No. I mean, but the people think he should be.
30 years ago, he could have.
Hey, I think that's true. So the two arguments I hear from people about life without parole sentencing, one is about, it's a moral argument. It says if you take a life, you should lose yours. And I know, as someone who grew up in Grand Rapids, son of a seminary professor, that's what the Old Testament says. That's eye for an eye. That's not what the New Testament says. And, you know, I had the opportunity to talk with Ed Sanders a little bit. He comes from a different faith, but similar perspective. I think we just got to be honest. If you are a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, retributive justice is something your people have already thought about and rejected. It's like, we should talk about that. And the second argument I hear is an empirical one. It says people who commit crimes are dangerous. And like, we can actually just test that, and we have. And so we've had about 180 juvenile lifers released, roughly. I think we have one that's gotten into trouble. And that's normal. That's what the research says. Recidivism rates for people with violent convictions are very low. And I think we can explain why, but I don't want to take up everybody's time. But I think those two arguments, they're both demonstrably false. And we just got to be honest with people about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, John. Yeah, I think what we're asking people to do when the campaign goes to a state, and we advocate for these sorts of changes, what we're asking people to do is to be true to their best values. That we believe in hope. We put our faith in the possibility of redemption. And we never want to foreclose upon that. And when you hear story after story after story after story of people who have changed, who are out in the community doing fantastic work, it makes you feel like you're doing the right thing. And that's what we all want, And when you see, if you want to look at the data, there was a study that came out of Montclair State University last year that surveyed a large group of former juvenile lifers and found their rate of recidivism was 1.14%, just like John said. So when a parole board looks at these folks who have served all this time for a crime they committed when they were too young to, vote or in some instances drive, parole boards are getting this right. And we can trust, what the success other states have had, including the state of Ohio. And so we're going to go to our next speaker via technology here, and we're going to hear from John Rush. Last year, Ohio abolished life without parole as a sentencing option for kids. And John Rush, who is the CEO of Clean Turn, 180 Demo, and Third Way Cafe, was instrumental. He was one of the business leaders who really got behind that effort in Ohio. So let me turn it over to you, Mr. Rush. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome, great. And Bonnie, I could see you all day. Some of your story. One of the story. Had the opportunity to experience, and so often I'm just reminded day after day in this work of the reality that none of us want to be defined by our worst decisions in life, a worst decision or worst decisions. And working in this space for 25 years, oftentimes people talk about a second chance. A lot of times we like to talk about a first chance for a lot of folks, a first real chance and a real opportunity to move forward in life and in a career. Clean Turn is one of Central Ohio's leading commercial cleaning companies. We're a business. We've been around for 10 years. I did this work in Chicago for about 10 years prior to coming here. Just launching small businesses that provide supportive employment for individuals who, once they're released from prison, find it difficult to re-enter back into the workforce. Because of the challenges that they've had in their past and employers not being willing to consider individuals because of their criminal history. And I've just, from day one, I grew up in a small trailer park in West Virginia. My mom's a recovering addict. I saw how life could change. I saw it in the life of my mother. And moved to Chicago, worked with a group of folks that were part of a group called the Vice Lords, and I saw the men that I had a chance to work with changed the way that they lived their lives. And the guys I worked with, they said, nobody will hire us. And I said, well, let's just start a company. And I was fresh out of the Marine Corps, had no idea what I was doing. And I said, great, you know what? Let's start our own company. We can decide who we want to hire and who we want to fire, and we'll make this work. And since that time, I've had the opportunity to be a part of many small businesses, hiring over 5,000 individuals who have spent time in jail or prison, are in recovery, or some combination of all those things. And I've learned that through our organizations, through individuals making healthy choices and having a positive network, that we can change perceptions. And a lot of this is about managing people's perceptions more than it is anything else. As a business owner, I could talk about the moral case for why I think this is a right decision. I could perhaps take a utilitarian approach and answer the question from a utilitarian perspective, if that's the philosophical viewpoint that one would perhaps want to take. There's many angles that a person could take for arguing why this is just kind of a basic common sense. I told Amber, who helped me organize this today, I'm like, this is so simple, it's complicated for me. But I guess I'll give it a stab. I mean, there's so much of the work that we're involved in is a lot more complicated than this. For me, a no-brainer. But as a business owner, just at Clean Turn alone, we've seen the $25 million economic impact, positive impact here in Central Ohio because of the work of our business. It's an impact that's been had by 1,000 individuals who would have cost on average about 30 grand per person per year if they were still in prison. From purely an economic standpoint, it's a no-brainer. Individuals who are educated, who want to be educated, who are motivated, who are driven, who recognize the certain decision in the past, and in some cases, a decision that actually wasn't in fact made, and that's a separate discussion. But in either case, folks who are demonstrating day after day responsibility, a moral compass, a desire to have a positive impact, folks who are not narcissistic, even though they live in a culture that's made up of a lot of narcissists. And frankly, perhaps oftentimes that's what's driving as a third reason for why this law isn't, done away with, but because it's not politically expedient. And it's funny, this is a footnote. I ran for office here in the state of Ohio, and I ran as a Republican. And a lot of my Democratic friends were like, "What? You're a Republican? How in the world are you a Republican?" They were just shocked. And I said, "I'm a Republicrat. There's things I like about both parties." And the experience that I had in running for office as a Republican was the experience that I was able to talk to a lot of Republicans and say, "Hey, look, I hear what you're saying, but this is a nonpartisan issue. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the details, and look at this business, and look at the impact that the men and women who are no longer in prison are making in our community every day. How they are leveraging their opportunity to work to provide for themselves and their families, simply because they were given the opportunity to do so. I'm doing nothing. All I'm doing is creating an opportunity." And men and women jump on the team and they run forward with energy, enthusiasm. And I tell business owners all the time, you're just stupid if you are limiting your hiring pool to individuals simply because of something in their past, whether that past is real or unreal, regardless. Like it's just you're limiting your capacity to grow as a company, to change your culture, to achieve new heights as a business. And because I've seen it over and over again. And when I think of young folks, I have 8 kids, and most of my kids are out of the house at this point. I have 2 more at the house. And I'd like to think, I've not been a perfect dad. I've made a lot of life choices that just have not been healthy choices. And I still think, though, that my kids have had a lot of privileges that a lot of other kids haven't had. And my kids have made choices themselves, especially as youngsters, that just aren't the best choices. And when I think about a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old being locked up without any chance of parole for the rest of their lives for a decision that they made as a young person, and in a lot of cases, arguably a decision that perhaps in some ways, because of circumstance, environment, etc., was almost inevitable. Not to negate personal responsibility, but just that makes it all the more complicated. I remember Cassandra was on our team several years ago, and she brought one of those little cardboard books to a circle that we called the motivation circle, where you talk about a goal that you've set for yourself and how you're going to achieve it. She said, "I never learned how to read. From the time that I was 3 until I was 7, my mom used to keep me in the closet, and she would only let me out when she was prostituting me to support her heroin addiction. I finally found some relief when I was put into my first juvie home, but then within 6 months I was molested. They took me out and I entered into another juvie home and again was sexually molested. By the time I was a teenager, I was on the streets and I was medicating my own self through my own addiction. And then that led to me being locked up as a juvie. She got out and continued with a life of addiction and crime until she entered into a sober living facility, went through detox, got clean and sober, and then about a year after, we were able to hire her, but she had never learned how to read, and I never heard her story until she was talking about this goal that she set for herself. She wanted to learn how to read the little cardboard book, the cat sat on the hat went flat, one of those books. And hearing her story, it's an example in my mind of somebody who never had a first chance, a real first chance. And to see her change and to see her move forward. And at that point in time, she was 25. She's 36, 37 now. To see her move forward over these last 10 years, to think about her if she would have done another sort of crime that may have led to prison for life, it just blows my mind. And so, as a business owner, I would encourage folks, I'd encourage the business community in Michigan, get active, get engaged. If you are a fair chance employer, if you provide supportive employment for individuals who've had some challenges in their past, speak up. Support legislators who are going to pass laws that make sense. They're not going to cost the economy extra dollars without any real result. It just does not make, it's not a good way to spend our money. And so, morally do the right thing, economically do the right thing, and let's be a society that's made up of diverse experiences and backgrounds and unique capabilities, and let's learn from men and leaders like Ronnie of what it means to make a difference in our community and in our state. And so do the right thing, Michigan. Anybody out there that has more questions about Clean Turn and what we do here at 180 or Third Way, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to talk with you, Mark. Thanks.
Much, Mr. Rush. Thank you for walking the walk, for being a second chance employer. Mr. Rush put his name on an op-ed in Cleveland at a absolutely critical time for the Ohio legislation. We needed the Senate president. We needed his support. And with people like Mr. Rush advocating as a business owner there in Ohio, the Senate president ended up taking the microphone on the floor and talking about how we are a nation that believes in redemption. And it just sailed right through the Senate after that. So we really, really are just in your debt, Mr. Rush. Thank you for sharing today. We also have Rayshun Holt, who is the program director at Beacon of Hope Business Alliance. Mr. Holt, can you tell us about your work there?
Yes. So thanks for having me. As mentioned, my name is Rayshun Holt, and I'm the program director at the Beacon of Hope Business Alliance. The Beacon of Hope is a nonprofit ecosystem led by the business community, our hiring partnerships, workforce development agencies, wraparound support organizations, as well as partnerships with the Adult Parole Authority and the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, all working in unison in a singular mission of providing sustainable employment opportunities to individuals working to overcome barriers in life, particularly the barrier of a criminal background. This work means a lot to me. The mission just means so much. Trying to slow down that revolving door of incarceration, and frankly, just get folks above the poverty line and into a sustainable life. And on a more personal note, a little over 5 years ago, I too was that returning citizen, trying to find my way into the workforce, trying to find my footing after a prison sentence, and just trying to right the ship, so to speak. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, a two-parent working middle class family in the late 80s, early 90s, like every other inner city across this nation. My neighborhood and our city was destroyed by the crack cocaine epidemic. Um, my middle class neighborhood quickly turned into an impoverished neighborhood. And the same way was the trajectory of my behavior. Um, just like my neighborhood, my behavior diminished as well. And I, I became a part of the streets, um, selling drugs, running with gangs, carrying guns, very, very ill-advised decisions until carrying a gun turned into using a gun. And the result of that was that I was sentenced to 18 years to life in prison. When I arrived to prison in 1996, there were approximately 150 children incarcerated in adult prisons in Ohio. Um, the first part of my prison sentence, the first couple years, they were a little tumultuous, so to speak. Still going through adapting to the culture, and still going through a lot of growing pains. And then in my mid 20s, late 30s, early 30s, things started to kind of change. I had a different perspective on life. I started to engage in the educational opportunities that were afforded to us in prison, college, multiple vocational trainings, any type of cognitive behavior therapy or recommended programming. I took part in it. And then something amazing happened. I began to connect with individuals coming from environments similar to the environment that I came from, but who had not yet made that mistake large enough to put them in a predicament is or a sentence is lengthy as the one that I was sentenced to. And I was able to connect with individuals and mentor individuals. And the strangest thing happened. People were leaving and not coming back. And that's when I began to understand the true power of change and mentorship. And eventually, after doing 21 years in prison and several trips to the parole board, I was granted my freedom. I had exclusively spent my adult years in prison. In 2016, I was released back to Cincinnati, motivated, uh, rehabilitated, and ready to make something out of my life. And then I found out the hard way that unfortunately, no matter what your dreams in your heart may be, sometimes you are judged on your past and not your potential. So a lot of doors were closing on me in pretty rapid fashion. I was fortunate enough to meet some folks at Cincinnati Works here in Cincinnati, which is actually the parent company now of Beacon of Hope, a workforce development agency with over 25 years of impact here in Cincinnati. And they connected me to Nehemiah Manufacturing, who is a leader nationwide in the mission of fair chance, second chance hiring. I was granted the opportunity to be able to make a sustainable living for me and my family. Um, Upward mobility was provided to me, and things rapidly progressed. And eventually, I found my way back over to Cincinnati Works, Beacon of Hope, and in the role as the program director, where I just have an opportunity every day to be able to help support those folks, those underserved folks coming from that background, and try to make decisions that to help streamline their pathway from incarceration to sustainable employment and ultimately the life that we all deserve the chance to try to achieve. Um, I support ending juvenile life without parole for several reasons. I believe that children are more than their worst mistakes, and they deserve the opportunity to demonstrate rehabilitation and change. I know I did. Research and common sense has proven that holding kids to the same standards as adults is unreasonable. I have a 2-year-old daughter. I have a couple of nieces and nephews that are teenagers. And sometimes I listen to the conversations that they have and some of the choices that they make. And I roll my eyes at them, of course, when they're not looking, right? And it's steeped in immaturity. And they're just being kids, right? Um, we know now that adolescent brains are not fully developed and don't mature until the mid to late 20s. Compared to adults, youth are less capable than adults in long-term planning, regulating emotion, impulse control, and an evaluation of risk versus reward. The majority of our laws reflect adolescents' diminished decision-making capacity, including limiting children's rights to vote, prohibiting them from purchasing alcohol or tobacco, and preventing them from entering into contracts. Yet our criminal laws uniquely treat them as adults. Look, who I was and what I did at the age of 15, it simply isn't who I am today. Children possess a unique capacity for change. And that's what I did. I changed. And hopefully the law will as well. Thanks.
For all your good work there in Ohio, and for just what a testament that it is, when you have an organization like Nehemiah Manufacturing, which was also very supportive of the legislation there in Ohio, man, it makes such a difference in so many people's lives. It's like helping them take that first step sets them up to take another step and another step and another step. It's just a matter of opening up opportunities for folks who have had so very few. So thank you for that. So our final panelist today is Jose Burgos. Jose, we got 5 or 6 minutes here, so not a ton of time. But please share from your experience, from your work with the State Appellate Defender's Office and the ICANN network, kind of what you've seen in Michigan and what remains to be done.
All right. Thank you very much. Man, you said we only got 5 or 6 minutes. That's going to be a tough one, but I'm going to make it. Yes, my name is Jose Burgos. I'm a former juvenile lifer. I served 27 years from the age of 16 to 43. Right now, I am currently the reentry specialist at the State Appellate Defender's Office. And one of the unique things about my job is that I get to work directly with juvenile lifers and non-juvenile lifers as well that are in the process of coming home, are in the process of needing the resources, the very limited resources that are also available for juvenile lifers. Not only do we need to change the laws, but we also need to keep that in mind as well, because there's a lot of juvenile lifers that come home with unique needs, and a lot of resources are just not there. So that's one thing that we also have to keep in mind. Change here in Michigan is definitely it's that time to do it. There's many examples here, not only here but across the country. Along with the job that I do at SADO, earlier this year I was appointed by Governor Whitmer to the Michigan Committee on Juvenile Justice. I'm also a member of the Prisons and Corrections section for the State Bar of Michigan, not attorney. And I'm just one of many. Who are out here doing great work. Juvenile life without parole. I remember when I first got sentenced at the age of 16, at one of the first prisons that I went to, I was trying to get a job at a factory, and they told me that, well, you can't get a job here because due to child labor laws, we can't give you a job. You know what I'm saying? What do you mean? I'm old enough to come to prison, but I can't work for a factory inside the prison. And that's just one of many, many examples of why we don't belong there. You know what I'm saying? Children, they just don't belong there. When I first went to prison, I had a lot of obstacles that I had to overcome. And then there just came a time, like Ronnie, there just came a time when I said, you know what? I have to do something to change my life around. I have to make sure that the crime that I committed and the life that was lost was not lost in vain. So I committed myself first in there to, getting my GED, becoming a mentor in there with mentoring program, mentoring not only youth that were in the prison, but also youth that were being brought from outside into the prison to talk to prisoners about, just staying away of a life of crime. And that's when I realized, man, that, that I had more to give. That I was more than that one mistake that I made at the age of 16. Change is definitely needed here in Michigan, because even though the laws have changed, we still have juveniles who are continuing to be sentenced again to life without parole. And the thing is that it all depends what county you're from. Receiving a term of years or receiving a life without parole sentence should not be determined by what county you're from. I'm gonna give you one quick example. Last month sometime, the first juvenile to be resentenced to life without parole was Ethan Paredes. It was 13 months. It had been 13 months since another juvenile had been, sentenced to that sentence again. This is a person who has been incarcerated over 30-something years, and just because he exercised his constitutional right to a claim of innocence, he's being resentenced to life without parole all over again. Anywhere you look, if you go and look up his case, you'll see that he is a great candidate for a term of years. And that's the reason why we have to make sure that legislation changes the laws, because there's just too many examples of that across the state. There's just so many. Again, I can't reiterate it enough. There's examples here. I always use my brother Sanders, Edward Sanders, as one. He inspires me a lot. Brother Sanders was a juvenile lifer who went in there, served over 40-something years, came home, graduated from the University of Michigan with a master's degree, and he is now working with the Conviction Integrity Unit in Washington County. This is somebody who they said was never going to amount to nothing. This is somebody who they said was no good. And you know what I'm saying? And here he is, being an example now for all of us. And there's just so many others on the inside that can be such great, people in this community that can do a lot of great work. And, we have to also keep in mind that even if the laws in Michigan do change, we still have to see the parole board. You know what I'm saying? So if you haven't demonstrated inside of prison that you have changed and you're worthy for that second chance, you're not going to come out. If you're a continued threat to society, you're not going to come out. You know what I'm saying? We're not saying open up the door and just let anybody out. You know what I'm saying? We're just saying give a person an opportunity to demonstrate that they are worthy of that second chance. And there's just too many, just too many guys in there that fit that description, men and women. A lot of, when I think about legislators sometimes that create these laws in the first place, I wonder how many of them as parents have had to deal with that very same issue. Because I guarantee you, if it was one of their children facing life without parole, it'd be a whole different story. It'd be a whole different story. And so they need to, I'm glad that some legislators are here, because now they get to connect directly with those who have been impacted. And even though they may not have known somebody personally in their family who went through it, now you get to hear our stories. Now you get to hear our stories. We're not saying that we forget about the victims, because I'm sure everyone in here who has a victim thinks about that all the time. That was one of my motivations. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to make sure that, the crime that I committed wasn't done in vain. That victim, in my case, I had two victims. One was paralyzed from the neck down. One of them, unfortunately, passed away. And my survivor victim, when I went to get resentenced, he was there by phone, and he told the judge, Your Honor, if I'm not here to tell you to give him more time, but if he can go out and prevent somebody else from going through what we went through, then please give him that chance. You know what I'm saying? And I earned that chance. I earned that chance way before they even started talking about life without parole for juveniles or the laws were going to be changed. I just knew, for myself, I knew that I was something better than that. I knew that was something better than that. I knew that crime that I committed at the age of 16 did not define who I ended up becoming as a man. So I think it's very important, man, that we as a state follow suit with the rest of the states. I mean, here we are. We have 31 states already that have abolished life without parole, or if they do have it on the law, it's not being used. Another thing that I wanted to mention, here in Michigan, 27%, 27% of the children in Michigan are children of color, but yet 71% were the ones who received life without parole sentences. Something about that ain't right, you know. And I challenge anybody who's here. I challenge you for those who are in the audience, juvenile lifers. If you don't know one personally, take a few minutes and talk to them. I guarantee you, when you leave that conversation, you'll have a different mindset. And again, we're not asking for a get out of jail free card, which is give us an opportunity. Give us an opportunity to and you know, when you give a person an opportunity, when hope is restored in somebody who's doing a life without parole sentence, you'll be amazed how that hope changes that person, and in turn that person, you know, each one teach one. You know what I'm saying? When I remember, like Ronnie said, when we was on the inside, juvenile lifers were probably the most tight group in the prison system. I mean, every single day we walked around that yard, we talked about our hopes, our dreams, and we encouraged each other. Not only did we create encouragement and we created hope for ourselves, but we also created hope for the rest of the population. Because if they stay, you know, if the juvenile lifers can come out there and be successful and do great, then maybe somebody will say, well, you know what, let's take a second look, not only at the juvenile lifers, but at the system as a whole. You know, and so I'm honored to be here. You know, the work that I do at SATO is amazing work because, again, I get to work with juvenile lifers who are in the process of coming home. There's nothing gives me greater joy than jumping on a Zoom meeting and seeing another brother who I walked through the yard with on that camera, and I'm telling him, bro, the moment you walk out of prison, I got you. If I can't help you out, I'm gonna, you know, plug you in with that resource. The resources are limited. We're gonna find it, and if we can't find it, I'll go in my own pocket just to make sure that you have what you need, so that you don't go back. You know, I stole the mantra from the military where it says "No soldier left behind." For me, it's no juvenile lifer left behind, and I'm gonna keep on doing the work until every single juvenile lifer is out of prison, and no other ones go in prison with life without parole. We have to stop that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. And you're talking about just profoundly gifted people waiting to prove it to somebody. And we just cannot afford, knowing how many Eric Alexanders and Jose Burgos and Ronnie Waters and Edward Sanders, Rayshawn Holtz and others. There's so many more. We can't afford to not have them out here doing this work. And so I really, really appreciate everybody. We have just a minute or two. Are there any questions for our panelists anybody would like to pose? Yes, sir, in the back.
So, Eric Dinsel from Advocacy University in Michigan, Executive Director of the Justice Fund. Just want to congratulate you. This is important legislation. We treat youth very differently than we treat adults in the state of Michigan, so I'm very happy for that. But to be very critical, I think an important thing, and my question is to the campaign in the state of Michigan, what are ideas that you have to provide direct services? The policy piece is great, but if you don't work with government entities to ensure more rich reentry screens, or to have the foundational support from the nonprofit sector to help these individuals when they come home, you're very much missing the bar.
Yeah, Eric, can you take a minute and just share about what the campaign tries to do, knowing that there are state level programming as well?
So, you know, your question brings us here today. You know, it's not what, you know, individual, you know, organizations can do, but it's, you know, what the business community can do as well. You know, one of the, you know, biggest driving factors of youth crime is poverty. Poverty and, you know, economic despair. When you hear individuals who have been incarcerated for over 40 years, think about what was going on 40 years ago. Think about what was going on in this country 50 years ago in communities of color. And if 71% of those children are being incarcerated, you know that it's from poverty, economic despair, and broken homes. So the business community provides job opportunities for individuals, which then builds self-esteem. I remember coming home 17 years ago and being denied. My self-esteem began to drop until I received that first job. Once I began to be able to provide for myself first, my self-esteem began to grow. So as my self-esteem grew, it helped me to be a better agent for change in the community. Now, for, you know, businesses and, you know, organizations, you can break a cycle of poverty that has been existed in this country for centuries. In communities, you begin to restore homes, you begin to restore the heads of household, you begin to make women in those communities feel safe because violence begins to change when economic improvement begins to level the playing field. So it's not just programs, it's about what businesses can do to ensure that individuals like myself, Edward, Jose, Donnell, Ronnie, and others are safely established to employ themselves in the community. Because when you close that door, what you're saying is you can't provide for yourself legally. So what you have to do is finding legal means. So again, the business community, you have a hand in this. In a way, you have helped create the situation that is existent. My father, my grandfather were those men who had to struggle to find employment. I was the third generation of that, seeing that despair in my community. So let's end the despair by providing job opportunities for these individuals. You know, we can't depend on the government to give funds, but we can depend on the business communities who are robbing our communities of labor and resources to, again, employ some of these individuals coming home. So that's why we're here, to make sure that the business community understand their role, because you have helped so many. Starbucks, Verizon, Lyft have done so much to ensure that individuals who come home are thriving. Not just home, but thriving. So this is the role of the business community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that from
So we are unfortunately over time, but please feel free to stick around. Folks who are wearing a button again will be a great resource. I've left some business cards up here. You can go to the websites for Safe and Just Michigan, the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, and the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. Follow us on social media. Obviously, Eric just spoke to the business community, legislators and legislative staff. We obviously need your support. We need bill sponsorship. You heard from Senator Irwin. We want folks who will lead on this issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is a moral issue. This is something where we want bipartisan sponsorship and bipartisan support. Maggie with the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice really did overextend herself making this possible today, but she works with business leaders every day to be strategic and think about how you can leverage your position and influence to make the world better. So again, okay, please go ahead.
Will be returning to our communities post-conviction. To address this issue of post-conviction employment, I recently introduced House Bill 4083, which is a reintroduction of my House Bill 4326, Ban the Box Bill from 2019. This act shall be known and may be cited as the Job Applicant Criminal History Act. As introduced, this bill will apply to both public and private employers and prohibit a criminal conviction inquiry until after a conditional offer of employment is presented. The prohibition would not apply to background checks or any written, electronic, or oral inquiry that takes place after the submission of the initial application for employment, or two, an inquiry that is necessary to enable an employer to comply with a requirement of state or federal law. This would still apply to private and public employers and would permit only a specific inquiry related to the job, i.e., a bank seeking to hire a bank teller, could inquiry as to any previous convictions for crimes of theft or dishonesty. The goal is to have this bill taken up in committee and ultimately enact a law that will address post-conviction employment and assist in combating recidivism. I look forward to future discussion regarding this issue, and please reach out to my office. And so my ask of all of you is to please, I know why you're here. I thank God for all of you, proud of you. And we can talk, but these legislators believe in emails, but I'm going to tell you something even better than emails. It's hard for us to put your email in another file as opposed to if you write us hard copy. It's hard for people to take that letter and destroy it. Write to the legislators. Write to Representative Pauline Winslow. She's the chair over Commerce and Tourism Committee. House Bill number 4083, ban the box. And finally, there are other legislators that you also need to reach out to that are members. Representatives John Roth, he's the Majority Vice Chair. Rep. Diane Farrington. Rep. Rodney Wakeman. Rep. David Martin. Rep. Sari Kembenzi, she's the Minority Vice Chair. Rep. John Cherry. Rep. Mary Manugian. Rep. Karen Whitsett. And finally, Rep. Tullio Liberati. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for your time, for your attention. Please stick around if you have questions. Find somebody with a button. We are really excited to see Michigan become the 26th state to abolish life without parole for kids. Thank you so much.